Well, it's about time this video got made, so here it is. Hello everyone and welcome to my Octobrush guide. My name is Silver, and for those that don't know, I'm one of the original Octobrush mains that picked it back up when it first came out and been playing it ever since. I became a little bit more popular for using this weapon after the Leagues Under the Ink Season 1, where I played with my friends on Team Speedruns Live, and we placed second place in top division of the first season. And I played Octobrush throughout the whole thing, and we went against a lot of the top teams, pretty much all the top teams at the time, and then ended with second place, only losing to Name Subject to Change, or NSTC. This is a video I've been meaning to make for quite some time, as a lot of people wanted me to make a guide centered around using the Octobrush, because when it came to information about the weapon, almost all of what you will find online tends to come from me, as I put in a lot of time into this weapon, and I mean a lot. I've gone over 4,000 hours in Splatoon, most of it which was used playing the Octobrush solely, and by that I mean both of them. And so I've put in a lot of time into this weapon, and I've put a lot of effort into learning things about it and making things for it with playstyles and figuring out how things function and how it compares to other weapons, and getting just all this information out in regards to the weapon so that people will share my interest in it and use it more and try to apply it in places where people thought that the weapon was not considered useful. The hope is that the weapon returns in Splatoon 2, as I'm making this video pretty late into the original game's lifespan. So if the weapon doesn't end up in the sequel, then this video will only be applicable to the people that want to stick with the first one, or just want to learn the weapon before the sequel comes out. So with that, let's jump right into it and get started with this guide. So to start off this guide, I'm going to go in depth with some data behind the weapon and see how it compares to some of the other rollers and the Krak-on, which its weapon shares its kit with and is often compared to. First off, let's look at some frame data, and believe it or not, Splatoon has some pretty decently documented frame data, not only from people testing these things, but also from files within the game that we have found. So let's look at the Octobrush's frame data, well, the more important one, which is time to kill, and let's see how it compares to the other rollers. So first off, the Octobrush actually kills faster than most of the rollers in the game, and it even kills faster than the Krak-on, despite the Krak-on being able to kill in only one swing. So the Octobrush kills in 17 frames. Now for those that don't know, Splatoon runs at 60 frames per second. The Krak-on roller kills in 21 frames, which is only a slight difference, and most people say you can't really see that. However, the advantage goes to the Octobrush still, because the Octobrush is able to maneuver itself as it flicks, and just by moving itself to the side or around, and with the swim speed, you can easily maneuver yourself around Krak-on rollers. And if they miss their flick, then they're pretty much gone, because the time it takes for the roller to flick again, they'll have already been splatted. The Carbon roller kills in 12 frames, and is probably the only roller that will give an Octobrush genuine problems. The Dynamo kills in 38 frames, which is significantly higher than the Octobrush's kill time, and significantly higher than any other roller's kill time. Next, let's get into one of the more important things behind a weapon, its gear. And the Octobrush can make use of a lot of abilities in the game, specifically, and not limited to, swim speed, damage up, special saver, ink recovery, special duration, bomb range up, ink saver sub, and ink saver main. These are some of the few abilities that you'll see commonly run on the Octobrush. Well, I guess ink saver main is a bit more debatable, as it is a personal thing that I like to use. However, the rest of these are some things you'll see on it as well. Also commonly seen on it are cold-blooded and ink resistance. So let's take a look at some of the abilities you'll want to use on your Octobrush in a bit more depth. First up, we have damage up. Now, damage up greatly affects the Octobrush's ability to kill, and the ideal amount of damage up you'll want to wear is between 1 to 2 mains. This amount of damage up will not only let you counter defense up, but it will give you enough damage to be able to effectively kill people in 2 swings at a very sweet spot. It'll also allow you to always kill people from 3 hits from the ink damage that comes off of the brush as you flick. You don't even need to make contact with the brush head itself, but just the flick damage will be enough to be lethal. Next up is Special Saver, and what greatly benefits both Octobrushes is they are both light depletion. So the Octobrush Vanilla is a light depletion Kraken, which is very rare now, as a lot of the Kraken weapons have been relegated to medium or heavy depletion. And then the Octobrush Nouveau is also a light Inksuka, which is another special that kind of has a few more heavy and medium depletion weapons, such as the Tentatek, which is heavy depletion. Now, this Special Saver, because it is on a light depletion weapon, an ideal amount would be about a main or so. 2 mains if you're really trying to make sure you keep that special, and 3 mains if you really just want to have it the second you spawn. I actually recommend having Special Saver on both of them. Now, you might not be too worried about an Inksuka when you respawn, but it helps the weapon out a lot more than you may realize, and being able to spawn closer to a Kraken on the vanilla one isn't too bad itself. Then we have Swim Speed Up, which greatly benefits everything in the game, to be honest, but it greatly helps the Octobrushes as they are a weapon that needs to chase things down, or in some cases get the hell away. Swim Speed Up also affects the speed at which your Kraken moves when you are a vanilla Octobrush, so it is greatly used to chase people down or just to get away in general, and it is greatly recommended to be put on the weapon regardless of how much you want to throw on there. You can put as much as 1 main, 2 mains, however much you want to use if you feel that that is something you want to use. I personally do not use swim speed on it because I don't really use Kraken so much to chase people for kills, but more so as a method of scaring people away from where things are and kind of just pushing people back more than it is seeking kills. What goes great with Swim Speed Up is Special Duration Up, which will effectively make your Kraken last longer or give you more shots out of your Inksuka. I don't personally recommend Duration on Inksuka. It can be kind of funny to use, as you'll get some people like me that count the amount of shots that come out of an Inksuka, so you try to, wade around to make sure that their Inksuka is done or they're in between shots or so, and Duration can throw things off a bit. But Duration is primarily used on Krakens to prolong the duration of it, hence the name, and is really good and really effective on a weapon that's very powerful when it comes to just pumping out Krakens like the Octobrush is. I highly recommend a main or a pure of Special Duration, as that is a more ideal amount. Any more than that is, I guess, not really overkill. However, there really isn't too much point to it, because if you couple this with Swim Speed Up, you will most likely get rid of a few of the enemy players, and then you'll kind of be just stuck in Kraken form trying to wait until it's out. Another ability that's pretty much great on everything is Ink Recovery Up. I really love having Ink Recovery Up on the Octobrushes, more so on the Nouveau, because what I like to do with the weapon is throw bombs constantly. So I couple Ink Saver Sub with the Ink Recovery. Now I don't really necessarily run a double bomb set, which is running a lot of Ink Saver Sub, so I can throw 2 bombs instead of just 1. I more so throw on a single main of both the Ink Saver Sub and Ink Recovery, so I can throw a bomb and then not have too much longer until I can throw another one. I recommend it around a main or so. 2 mains is also really good, but if you're doing it for what I am, where you're just trying to pump out bombs, 2 mains is pretty good. It also helps when you're trying to place down beacons with the vanilla Octobrush. Say you're at like low ink and you're just recovering and you're trying to pump out a beacon immediately, Ink Recovery also assists with that. Or if you place a beacon and suddenly there are people there, you can get the ink back you need to fight really quickly. Overall, I just really recommend Ink Recovery on both Octobrushes. Now, Ink Saver Main and Ink Saver Sub are more opinion based if these are really good. I like to use Ink Saver Main and Ink Saver Sub depending on the Octobrush. Now, a lot of the times I'll use Ink Saver Main on the vanilla Octobrush when it comes to Rainmaker, because the Octobrush itself is actually one of the best weapons when it comes to popping the Rainmaker shield. And because of that, the weapon is very good at contesting other weapons when it comes to popping it. And because you may find yourself in a situation where you are trying to pop the shield alone, an extra amount of ink will allow you to continue to contest until your teammates arrive. That's why I originally started using Inksaber main, so I could continue to fight the shield and just pretty much provide the damage output in a constant stream. Now, a lot of people have debated with me about whether or not I should be using Inksaber main, but like I said, it's opinion based, and I really like using it. I feel that Inksaber sub is pretty important when it comes to playing the Octobrush Nouveau. As I like and mentioned before, one good thing for it is pumping out bombs, which is what I do. I'll throw a bomb, wait a bit, throw another one, and it's probably my primary way of getting around the map quickly is to just toss a bomb in front of me, flick a few times, and then use the explosion from the bomb to quickly, cover the ground so I can move forward again. It's a very good tactic, and the Octobrush Nouveau in general is just really good at tossing bombs out. And it's got a good kit for it too. It's got the Splat bombs, which are really good and they explode faster than suction bombs, and have the ability to roll around and go off walls and roll off walls and even to get people that are below it. And then it has Inkzuka, which is a really good special. So I recommend Inksaber sub for the Octobrush Nouveau, and regardless if you want to use Inksaber main, I still think it's a good idea. Now, this one isn't really one I use myself, however I talked to quite a few people that have used it, and that's bomb range up. It seems like a good idea for, having the ability to throw bombs farther to keep the pressure going, and you couple this with Inksaber sub and Ink recovery, it's pretty good. I haven't messed with it myself too much, however all the people that I have talked to that use this say it's pretty good and it's pretty fun to use. So I'd recommend probably around about a main. Any more than that, it just seems kind of a waste and just a tad bit overkill unless you're wanting to be Hitzel. So here's another thing that I never really used, even when people considered it a really important thing to have on every weapon, and that's Cold-Blooded. This reduces the amount of time that you remain marked from something like an echolocator or a point sensor. I haven't really seen too much value in this, as I'm never really afraid of being marked. More so, I use it as bait, especially if I'm playing the vanilla Octobrush. I will let people think that I'm just, a defenseless player. I'm sitting here just waiting to be approached and killed, when most of the time I sit around with a Kraken. So when I am marked, I more so use my mark as bait to get people to come after me, because they always seem to chase down people that are marked. Now, if that's not your style and you don't want to stay marked, Cold-Blooded is relatively decent. However, it has fallen off significantly in the recent months as people have stopped being afraid of being marked in general. So you're probably not going to see this as often. However, if you really do want that reduced time, it's not too bad. So here's the last ability, and boy, this is something that people get on my throat about all the time, and that's Ink Resistance. This used to be one of the most vital pieces to have on any weapon, and I never use it, especially on Octobrush. I use it on some things, however I've never used Ink Resistance on Octobrush, and the reason for that simply is that I don't extend into enemy ink blindly. Now, a lot of times people use Ink Resistance on frontliner weapons like Tentatek or 52 or things, that will push up through enemy ink. However, I've always played in a way where I make sure that things are in my color before I move forward. Then in a recent patch, they made it so when an Octobrush flicks, after the second flick you will paint your own feet. Now, I've seen some people say, oh, you should still wear Ink Resistance because it's after the second flick that you cover your feet. But how many times do you see an Octobrush flick once? Not often. So more often than not, you're going to find yourself, in your own ink just from you flicking yourself. If you overextend into enemy ink, you might be doing something incorrect. You probably shouldn't be pushing up that far. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't use Ink Resistance. If you want to use it, that's fine. one argument I've seen for it is people say they like to use it so they don't get nerfed by touching enemy ink while rolling around. That's perfectly fine. I'm not trying to say you shouldn't use something, it's just not something I personally really use, and I just don't see the use for it myself. It's definitely a good ability, but it's not something I'm partial to. Now that we're finally done with gear, let's get into playing this in modes. I won't be covering Turf Wars, so don't expect to hear that in here. I'm going to be simply covering Splat Zones, Tower Control, and Rainmaker. First off, let's start with Splat Zones, the most basic competitive mode in the game, and retains the emphasis on covering the ground like Turf War does. However, it mostly is confined to one spot on the map. This is one of the better modes for Octobrush, I guess. I guess there's only 3, so obviously it's going to be one of the better ones. Splat Zones requires you to quickly cover a certain area of the map, which the Octobrush can do very, very well. It's especially good at turfing the smaller zones that you'll see in maps like Moray Towers and Blackbelly Skate Park. Those are some of the maps where this weapon excels the most, or even very confined zones like Urchin Underpass, where it's very easy to just cover the map from that small little bump there. It gives the Octobrush the ability to output its ink very quickly, and it actually puts out the ink faster than the Dynamo does. Now, of course, the Octobrush doesn't have the, halfway across the map killing ability that the Dynamo does, but when it comes to its matchup, which will be covered later, against the Dynamo, the Octobrush in fact does output the ink faster. It's just not going to do it from a safe distance. But when it comes to smaller zones, the Octobrush is just going to do better than the Dynamo because of how fast it can output that ink in a very small area. Not really that small, but in a more condensed and confined area where the Dynamo has to take that long period of time to flick, and then it might not even cover all of that area within that time frame. So one thing you'll want to make sure you do in Splat Zones is you should always have your 3 beacons down if you're using the vanilla. One thing you want to make sure is that your beacons are always close enough to the zone so your teammates can always make sure they're back in and close to the objective. This is an important thing to do, and I stress this: use your beacons and use your teammates' beacons. A lot of people don't use beacons. They just will continue to super jump to someone, and they tend to not use stealth jump, so they'll leave a marker, and then it's easy just for their jump to be camped. Use beacons, place beacons, and you should also be watching for beacons. Be sure to look at the gamepad, especially if the enemy has a beacon user as well. The bombs on the Nouveau are a great way to pressure the zone. If you feel it's too dangerous for you to get back in or just to get close enough to the zone to contest it, just simply throw your bombs. If you're wearing either Ink Saver Sub or Ink Recovery like I mentioned in the previous section, then you should be able to do a decent amount of pressure with your bombs if you're using the Nouveau. Then, once you have your Inkzuka, you can use it to safely clear a spot for your teammates or yourself to get closer to the zone. If you're using the vanilla, I wouldn't exactly say using Kraken is the best way to clear a zone. It's going to make people move around a bit, but it's not really a good way to clear a zone. Your best use for a Kraken is to provide an entryway or to just scare people away from the zone. But if you're trying to use Kraken to get back into the zone, that's probably not the smartest thing to do. People will just move out of the way. Chances are you won't get anybody unless the zone is very small or the surrounding area is covered in your ink already. One good example of this is once again Skate Park. If you Kraken in their zone, but say all of the map is in your color, you're probably going to get them. But if it's a big map with a big zone and you Kraken and just swim into the zone, chances are you're not going to get anybody, and then you just kind of wasted a special. What you should be doing is coordinating it with some teammates so that you can scare people away from the zone, or if you're going to Kraken in the zone, make sure there are teammates watching, because when people swim around, they leave ripples, things that can be seen by your teammates. So if you scare someone, they move, you can't kill them, chances are your teammates will.
And one important thing you should be doing is always examine the maps for where you think you would be safe. Because the Octobrush isn't a weapon that can easily throw itself into combat like a shooter, you need to make sure that you are always safe and you just have the ability to cover ink safely. Always play the maps and look around. I actually recommend using recon or just messing around in squads to figure these things out. You need to practice a lot. The weapon isn't going to be easy, so don't just run into this expecting it to be free. You need to practice this a lot, and putting this weapon into use in splat zones isn't going to be very easy, and like I said, just don't expect it to work all of a sudden. It's not going to be as easy throw-in as a Krak-on. Now, before people bring up that I mentioned that it's not easy to throw in, when you do figure things out, the Octobrush is better than the Krak-on in my opinion. I believe that the Krak-on is slightly inferior than the Octobrush, but people have yet to really realize it. The Octobrush is more dangerous if used correctly, and the patience and practice has been put in. And Splat Zones is probably the second best mode for the Octobrush. And next up is Tower Control. And oh boy, how do I even start with Tower Control? The fact is, I actually made a video just on how to use the Octobrush in Tower Control probably 2 years ago at this point, I believe. Basically, what the video is telling people that the Octobrush obviously shouldn't be a weapon that should be bum rushing the tower and trying to fight the tower when there are enemies on it, and how you should in fact be playing the Octobrush on Tower Control is not something so many people seem to get. And so, for those that haven't seen that video, what I proposed is that people that use Octobrush and Tower Control, rather than trying to push the tower themselves or trying to combat the tower, they should be playing bodyguard. And what that means is, as your teammates push the tower, you should be trailing behind, or you should be pushing up ahead, making sure you're close enough to the tower, placing beacons as your team advances, but you yourself should not be on the tower unless you have a Kraken. And if your enemy gets on the tower, you should back up and do not, and I repeat, do not try to engage the tower. And if you're new to the game, and you may not understand why, there is a pole in the tower, and this pole basically makes it so the Octobrush cannot attack the other side of the tower. And so everyone's natural reaction is to get on the other side of that pole from the opponent. So if they do, you're just going to be flicking at a pole, they're not going to take any damage, and they're just going to shoot you. Because their hands and their guns are going to go over the pole, or like just to the side of it, so they can still shoot you, while your flicks are just going to be blocked by that pole. This problem isn't exclusive to the Octobrush, as all rollers kind of suffer from that, but the other rollers do a bit better job at it, because the way they flick, it's easier for them to flick over the pole just by flicking up from the ground, or they can just simply roll around the tower, where the Octobrush isn't a once hit, like it's not going to squish someone in one hit, so rolling around isn't going to fix it, and flicking up the tower from the ground isn't a reliable fix either. So what I suggest is be a bodyguard for the tower. Play defender. Just trail it, or, well, lead it. Just use your Kraken to push the tower or to keep the enemy away. You be the one that watches the flanks. Just be the bodyguard for the tower, essentially, is what I'm trying to say here. You can do the thing where you just sit on the tower and be the tower rider. That's perfectly fine. And if you feel that you can engage the enemy on the tower, that's fine. But I'm saying that how I believe the weapon can be very useful in tower control is by simply playing the bodyguard role. And it's more useful than you may realize. A lot of maps people don't watch flanks in tower control because people are too focused on pushing forward that they're not watching behind. And so that gives a very quick killing weapon a very important role, and that's just something that the weapon excels at, is its ability to kill and kill people before they realize that you're there. And it's a very good weapon for making people drop their special as well. So say you've got some guy who's flanking with his bubbler or his Kraken, chances are you'll make him drop it without noticing that he was being attacked because of how fast the weapon kills. And finally, Rainmaker, my personal favorite and the mode I think the Octobrush is the best at. And there's a few reasons for that. The Octobrush is actually the fastest shield popping main weapon, where the only thing that can outright outdo it is an Ink Strike, which does roughly triple the amount of damage to the Rainmaker's shield. No main weapon can outclass this by itself. The only weapons that come remotely close to outclassing the Octobrush when it breaks the shield is a Bamboozler and a Hydra. So, another thing that makes the Octobrush really good in Rainmaker is its ability to lay ink down fast by rolling on the ground. It is the second fastest rolling roller in the game, with the first being the ink brush. And so what you would do is roll around with the Octobrush to create a path. Now that might seem like you're putting yourself in a situation where you're just a huge target, and yeah, you kinda are, but with your ability to move faster than most people, you can still outrun the danger. In fact, the roll speed of the Octobrush can actually outrun a Kraken sometimes. If a Kraken has no swim speed on it, the Octobrush can actually roll away from it perfectly fine, and will roll faster than the Kraken can move. So you can actually use the Octobrush's roll to create a safe path for your teammates to quickly follow and get points very quickly, where normally they would try to cover ground with the Rainmaker, or just have each other take shots to cover the ground as they travel. Or you can have the Octobrush make the path very quickly for everyone to follow through, and then just have the Octobrush be the conductor of the train, essentially. The Octobrush really excels in this mode because Rainmaker favors a lot of sharking. When it comes to hiding and waiting things out, the Octobrush excels at that. Its quick ability to kill, its wide range, where compared to rollers it's got a pretty decent range, and its damage output just allows it to sit and wait or just rush in and kill. It's very, very good at that. And with the amount, it doesn't even have to pop the shield, it doesn't have to play the objective itself. If your team is pushing the Rainmaker, you can cover the ground, because there's so much emphasis on a moving objective, that chances are not everyone's going to always be in the middle of the map. So while the teams are, going one side or the other, you can always just be out there getting control of the map again. And then the second the roles have reversed to where you're in control of the Rainmaker, suddenly you have the entire map to your color, which will allow you to easily move into the enemy base, start rolling to create that path again, and then just, go back into sharking. Wait for the enemy to come back down into your ink, because they have to move. The Octobrush just greatly excels the second it has control. It is a very powerful weapon that not only can give itself control, but once it has that control, it's a very good keeper of it. So basically, Rainmaker is the best mode for the Octobrush, followed by Splat Zones, then Tower Control. And Tower Control is only at the bottom because I feel like it takes a bit more practice to get used to and to understand than Splat Zones and Rainmaker. The core mechanic of Rainmaker and Splat Zones are pretty simple and pretty easy to understand, with Rainmaker being a weapon that can greatly pop the shield, can out damage a lot of weapons when it comes to breaking it, can quickly cover ground, can cover paths for your teammates, and then in Splat Zones it can cover the ground very quickly and do it very well compared to a lot of the more quote-unquote better inking weapons. And so with Tower Control, because it's not so easily thrown in, I believe that it just takes a bit more time, and so I would say that it's only its worst mode simply because the amount of time it takes to apply it correctly would, take more time than the other modes. So now let's talk about some tricks that the Octobrush can do. And some of these are things that not many people actually know about, as a lot of times when I watch streams of people that play the Octobrush, or I watch videos from friends of mine that play the weapon in tournaments, I see a lot of these not being used, or I'll talk to these people and they go, "What? I didn't know that was a thing." So let's go over some of these right now. This first one is debatably not really a trick, but a bit of a tidbit for some of you that use the Octobrush. Have you ever tried breaking an enemy beacon by running up to it and flicking at it a bunch? Have you ever wondered why it takes so many flicks to break the thing where other weapons can take it down in like a couple shots? Well, what if I told you you shouldn't be flicking at the beacon? Yes, you shouldn't, because rolling over a beacon with the Octobrush breaks it instantly. And that's not exclusive to the Octobrush. The ink brush does it as well. Now you may be questioning, why does it break it instantly if the Octobrush doesn't squish people instantly? And the only thing I can say about that is I have no idea why it works that way. But it is a lot faster to break beacons with the Octobrush by rolling over them. You will get out of there very quickly, you will be able to break it, rather quickly, and you won't turn yourself into this random duck that's just flicking at a beacon for like 2 seconds just for it to break. If you roll over it, you can just break it and just continue to move on as, continue to roll around, or you can just dip back into the path you already made while you were trying to roll over it. So, basically, don't flick to break beacons. Just roll them over. Have you ever seen that thing where a Dynamo would flick at a wall as trying to climb up, then would hold the roller out as it would, rub against the wall to create that, the ink on there without having to flick again? The Octobrush can do something very similar, and it wouldn't be very out of the realm of possibility for people to be going, well, yeah, obviously. But what I'm trying to say here is, you should be doing that if you're going down walls. Now, if you're wondering what I mean by that is, if you're in a map like Flounder Heights, you should be holding out your roller as you fall down a wall so you can cover the wall as you fall. The Octobrush struggles when it comes to painting walls because for some reason Nintendo never gave it a bomb that actually sticks to the walls or a burst bomb. They gave it a splat bomb, which doesn't help climbing walls. So if you're in a part where you're trying to climb walls, or you're trying to make a wall easier for you to climb in the future, you should be jumping down from walls while holding the roller out and brushing against the wall as you fall. This will create a straight line as you fall so you can climb back up. A lot of people didn't know that this was a thing the brush could do. Despite the fact that rollers can do this, I've actually been asked quite a few times if the brushes could do this as well. And the answer to that is, yeah, they can do it. Chances are you've heard the term splatter dashing. This term actually goes back all the way to the test fire, and this is basically when you would look at the ground, shoot, swim through the ink you created, then shoot again. This is used commonly to travel through enemy ink, or to basically get away from an exchange that you have no interest in staying in. And the Octobrush and even the ink brush can do something very similar to this, where you don't even need to roll to escape. So if you have that fear that by rolling away you create, a big target on your forehead, you can do this. And there's no real term for this, so I'm just going to call it flick dashing, I guess. So basically, you would do the same exact process that you would do for splatter dashing, where you would look at the ground, press the trigger button to fire, or flick in this case, and then swim through the ink and repeat the process. Now, while this may seem a lot slower than rolling, and it is, but it makes you less of a target, and it actually, believe it or not, is a little fast. It actually is a very good way to escape from exchanges or to just get through enemy ink. Though, when it comes to just getting through other ink, I do recommend rolling or just not engaging enemy ink to begin with. You should be avoiding having to flank through, but if you do have to escape through enemy ink, I actually recommend using this a bit more than rolling around, as rolling around creates a bigger hitbox than just doing this. So now one thing I want to go over is matchups with the weapon. Now this is basically when you would go into a fight with another player in the game and how the Octobrush stacks against other weapons. Now, keep in mind a lot of this stuff is going to be done through practice, and this is my personal opinion for a lot of these, as I have put in a lot of time with this weapon and I have personally learned these matchups very well. First off, when it comes to matchups, let's talk about some of the bad matchups. And when using a short-ranged weapon, you're probably immediately thinking that long range is its worst matchup. And that's true. Weapons like E-Liter, 96 Gal, the Squelchers, and the Pros are all going to be bad matchups for you. But that doesn't mean you can't win those matchups. Like mentioned previously, practice goes a long way, and with that practice you can eventually win these matchups and turn the tides of the battle. When it comes to a lot of these weapons, like the Squelchers or the Pros, one of their downsides when it comes to this matchup is the fact that they have very little spread to them, allowing you to maneuver around their fire to get close to them. Weapons like 96 are a bit questionable, as their spread may or may not still allow them to hit you. Then when it comes to chargers, it's a bit more tricky, as if you're playing against a Splatterscope, it's going to fire pretty fast and pretty constantly at you. And then if it's an E-Liter, you might want to actually advance between its shots. A lot of people don't try this, but when an E-Liter fires, it has a decent amount of time before it can fire again. And the amount that it will try to put out, like its shots, depends on how much damage up they're wearing. How much damage up they're wearing decides how fast of a charge they can kill you with. So if you have an opponent that isn't exactly running a lot of damage up on their E-Liter, then you can safely advance a bit more between shots. However, you do need to be careful depending on the type of E-Liter you're playing against, as if they are a vanilla, they're going to burst bomb you the second you get close, or if they're a custom, they're going to use a Kraken on you. If you're playing against a vanilla E-Liter and it tries to burst bomb you, this is actually a matchup you can win. And the reason for that is when an E-Liter burst bombs, or any weapon in general that tries to burst bomb enemies that are right in their face, they tend to try and swim around the target as they lay their burst bombs down. This usually messes up a shooter's aim, and that's the intent, is to mess up aim. But the Octobrush has such a wide spread that you don't really even need to aim at them. Chances are, if you're just flicking and try to move along with them as they swim around you to burst bomb, they're going to be taking damage just as much as you are, and chances are they will probably die faster than you will. If an enemy tries to burst bomb you, and this applies for any weapon that tries to burst bomb you close quarters, you should just be trying to follow along with them when you flick to ensure that you can get the kill, if not a trade. This is not something you should be outright losing unless they're running something like 3 mains and 9 subs of damage up, where the burst bombs are most likely going to be very lethal. Another questionable matchup is anything with a splash wall. Commonly, weapons like 52 Gal will play off their splash wall, and what I mean by that is they will almost always throw a splash wall before firing. This actually is a great downfall to the weapon, as for most people don't realize this, but a splash wall doesn't automatically deploy. When a splash wall is thrown, it doesn't automatically block shots. It has a time frame in which it requires to activate, and that time frame is actually more than the 52 Gal's kill time. So if you've ever had someone that says, oh, they killed me through my splash wall, chances are it was because it didn't get finished deploying. So if you're playing against a 52 Gal and it already has its splash wall up, that is a more questionable situation for you. However, if you approach a 52 and it is yet to throw its splash wall, and it is in the process of doing so, do not back down, because it still has to wait for that time for it to deploy. Use that opportunity to continue attacking the 52, as its over-reliance on the splash wall will allow you to deal out the damage before the splash wall is there to protect it. Its kill time is much faster if it doesn't rely on a wall, but chances are 52 is just going to panic and throw a wall anyway. Another questionable matchup is against blasters, and a Luna is a bit more favorable for a matchup because the Luna's kill time is only very low if it directs you. So if a Luna misses the direct on the Octobrush, the chances are you can win the exchange, or if not, just trade. The Octobrush's kill time is very quick, and it actually almost matches the Luna's 2-shot. A scarier matchup would be against a CRB or custom range blaster, as it can safely get you from the far distance. This is a bit more of a scary matchup as it can just backpedal away from you as it blasts, or if it's quite afraid it can Kraken, as it is another Kraken weapon. One thing you want to make sure you do is use swim speed to swim between the shots that it makes. Because it is a long range shooter, it doesn't really have any close range options unless it's using a Grim. If you see a CRB that is shooting at you, you should try just rushing it. The chances are that it will try to direct you close range, or if it has a Kraken, it'll just Kraken immediately. If you get it into a point where it needs to direct you, then you pretty much won the exchange, and all you need to do is just fight it. If it doesn't have a Kraken, then it needs to direct you to win, and if it doesn't, then it loses. If it's a Grim, it'll try to burst bomb you, and going back to what I mentioned earlier, this kind of exchange you will most likely win anyway. Another questionable matchup is against Splatlings. Weapons like the Hydra, the Heavy, or the Mini are very questionable depending on the one they use. If it's a vanilla Mini, then it works similar to a Tentatek, so you can apply the matchup from the Tentatek to this weapon. If it is a Zimmy, then chances are it's almost always going to have a bubble, and a Zimmy's default approach is to throw Disruptor, which doesn't do any damage and won't hinder your damage, but chances are you're going to be approached immediately by, if not the Zimmy itself, which outranges you and also outranges the Tentatek for that matter, but its teammates are most likely not going to be far and can see you when you're disrupted. If it's a Heavy, if it's a vanilla one, then it'll have that over-reliance on splash walls that I mentioned previously, so just rush it down if it's trying to throw a splash wall. If it's not, then it'll most likely be sitting at a safe distance away from you, and chances are you're probably going to have a hard time approaching it with its spread and damage output, so you need to be very careful. If it has a Kraken, so if it's a Heavy Deco, chances are it's almost always going to have a Kraken as well. Both the Zimmy and the Heavy are pretty fast painters, so the chances are they're almost always going to have a special ready to stop people from getting close to it or to give it a chance to move forward. If it's a Hydra, it's almost always going to be sitting where you'd expect a Charger to be sitting. Very rarely do Hydras move forward, and if it's a custom Hydra, it's almost always going to have a bubble. And I mean it, it's almost always going to have it. So you pretty much, if you want to approach a Hydra, you need to make sure that it is not finished charging its shot or it doesn't have a bubble. A Hydra that is fully charged is a 3-shot kill. If it is not fully charged, it is a 4-shot. It has a very long time to charge as well, which you can take advantage of. However, like I mentioned before, if it's got a bubble, then it pretty much puts you in a bad situation. If it's a vanilla Hydra, then its only options are to shoot you, as it has a very unreliable splat bomb, which if it tries to lay down for you to die to, you can escape from, and then its special is just simply an echo. So that was quite a bit of time about talking about bad matchups, but what are its good matchups? And obviously its good matchups are very short-range weapons, or weapons that are short to mid-range. Its ability to output damage and ink faster than a lot of short-range weapons give it this ability to just dominate over them. And this even includes other rollers. The Octobrush has a faster kill time than almost all of the rollers. The only roller that has a faster kill time is the Carbon, and the Carbon suffers from a short range problem already, so chances are you can either trade with a Carbon already or just back out of its range while still being, having it inside your range, and you can still deal damage to it, while its only option for combating you outside of its range are to throw its burst bombs. If you're playing against a Krak-on or a Splat roller of any kind, its kill time is higher than yours. Not by much, but it still has a worse kill time, and you might want to use one thing that the Octobrush has that rollers don't, and it's its ability to maneuver itself as it flicks. The thing with rollers is once it flicks, it has to dedicate to the direction it chose to flick in. It can slightly move as it flicks, but where it decides to flick at is where its damage is going to go, where the Octobrush and even the Inkbrush can maneuver themselves as they move and flick and put out that damage. So you can quickly move around a Krak-on or a Splat roller's flick while still dealing damage to it, as it cannot reposition itself as it flicks. and it will take too much time for it to flick again. So pretty much if a splat roller misses its first flick on you, it's dead. And surprise, one of the more favorable matchups for the Octobrush is against a Dynamo. If the Octobrush is within close enough of a Dynamo to where it can deal damage, chances are the Octobrush will win the exchange. Dynamo is a very slow killer in comparison to the Octobrush, which is a very fast killer. The Dynamo is more than triple the amount of time required to kill than the Octobrush, which allows the Octobrush to kill before the Dynamo is even ready to flick most of the time. The only time where a Dynamo is going to be a scary matchup for you is if you are not close enough to deal damage. But if you want to approach, you can actually do that between its flicks. Because of how fast the weapon kills, you can actually still safely approach before it finishes flicking, and you can probably still kill it before it even finishes. And that pretty much leaves other short-range shooters like the Splash, the Sploosh, the Arrow Spray, and the Ink Brush as a more favorable matchup for you, as they are shorter range than you and actually still have a higher time to kill than you. A lot of these weapons will be easy fodder for you, as you will just simply crush them as they cannot approach you, and even if they are close enough to you, you still kill faster than they do, which is kind of sad for them, but still a good thing for us. So that's a bit of a ramble on matchups. Now keep in mind that these things are not set in stone. You won't always lose to weapons like the 96, the pros, the E-leaders, all the things like that, as with practice comes the ability to counter those and learn how to play against those weapons, and then it's also the maps that play a role in how you can play against these matchups. So don't take what I say as fact and say that you won't win those fights, but put forth the effort into figuring out how you can win those fights. Weapons like the Gals that have an over-reliance on splash walls, the Nouveau do a very good chance against, as they can throw a splat bomb at the wall, which almost instantly breaks a splash wall now, so they can apply that pressure even if a Gal safely is behind their wall. Or, if it has long range, the splat bomb can apply pressure to that weapon as well. So, learn your matchups, practice, play a lot of scrims, play a lot of squads, figure out things out, and just try. You know, it's not going to be easy. This thing isn't going to be a simple pickup, but it is something that is very strong when put in the right hands, and I'm sure that people will get the hang of it eventually. So we're finally coming to a close to this video, and it's been going on for quite some time. But I'd like to take this moment to tell people that I'm not the only Octobrush player. Almost every time when I see discussion about the weapon or people talking about a player of the weapon, I'm pretty much the only one that's mentioned. And what most people may be surprised about is that I don't want that. I want people to acknowledge the other players of this weapon. So, I want people to realize that there are others, and I want to give some special shoutouts to some of those players. So, for the people you view on screen right now, I highly recommend you take a look at these players and check them out, as these are also other players that have put in a lot of time into using this weapon. I want others to be given a chance to shine, and I want this weapon to be seen more often. Don't just expect me to be the only one to play it, as there are plenty of others. So, please take a moment to go check out these other players, give them a follow, give them a sub, and just show them the support you show me, because we are all in this for one weapon, and we just want this weapon to shine. So, please. And so, that concludes my Octobrush guide, and I'm thankful for everyone that made it this far and endured the entire video to get to this point, and I'm thankful for all of the people that have shown their support over this time, as this video has been in the making for quite some time, and the interest for this video has existed for quite some time as well. As, like I mentioned at the start, I've been an outlet for information for this weapon for quite some time. I'm by far not the only player of the weapon, however, it is common that I am one of the more knowledgeable sources of it, and the game in general. So this has been something people have been looking forward to for quite some time, and I'm happy to have finally provided this, and I hope that people enjoyed this. This took a lot of time to make. All this commentary was recorded through multiple sessions. It wasn't all done in one go, and the amount of re-records of everything also took some time. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that was here, that watched it. I want to thank everyone that I've played with over the years, all the teams I've been with. I just want everyone to know that I appreciate every single one of you, and I want to thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to play with you, and for allowing me to show you this weapon. So, to end it all off, I hope everyone has a good day. I hope everyone has learned a few things about this weapon, and I hope you all give it a chance. It is a great weapon and deserves to be played more, and I hope that the Splatoon devs bring it back for Splatoon 2.